Welcome to Global Insider Talks. I'm Jeff Smith, Chief Operating Officer of Factum Global, and today I have the privilege of speaking with Amanda Clinton, Senior Director for International Affairs at the American Psychological Association. Amanda is a licensed clinical psychologist, a clinical neuropsychologist, and a former professor of psychology at California State University and the University of Puerto Rico. Our conversation today is especially significant given an increased focus on mental health issues, the people who are suffering, and our collective willingness to discuss and offer treatment options, particularly in light of the recent pandemic, which brought mental health to the forefront for so many, not only in the US, but around the world. In this interview, we'll explore Amanda's unique perspective on the intersection of psychology and global affairs, giving light to the importance of addressing mental health in an international context. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you.
So how about we start and give our viewers a bit of a background on the global role of the American Psychological Association and your mandate as Senior Director of International Affairs, just to set the scene.
Yeah, I am the Senior Director for the Office of International Affairs at the American Psychological Association. So I'm responsible for inward and outward facing global perspectives in the organization, which is about 131 years old. This is important in the bigger context and has nearly 150,000 members across the world. So it is the largest professional organization of psychologists in the globe. But we have part of our operating principles in our relatively recently 2019 impact strategic plan, and then this 2024's update of the strategic plan, actually a call to embrace global perspectives in the work that the association does. So I'm fortunate to have a key role in that. And I think, the fact that it is part of our strategic plan to work as a collaborative global partner says a lot about APA's interest in thinking about psychology as I understand it. And I believe if you Googled it, would find that psychology is a study of the human experience. So while we have systems that are national, regional, and so on, human beings really, and our experience isn't limited by borders or passports. And APA is really trying to start working in that broader way.
That's great. And before we move forward, because I'm going to ask you about some of the work that the APA is doing that you're spearheading. I mentioned at the top, the pandemic was really responsible for bringing to light mental health challenges that obviously are not new in the world, but really allowed individuals to talk a little bit more about it. Not a new phenomenon. Why do you think the pandemic sort of was the catalyst for that? And talk a little bit, because this is a global conversation, talk a little bit about how the comfort level for people suffering from mental illness, it's different around the world. People talk about these issues differently. What have you experienced?
Yeah, a lot of this I think is about, in terms of concentric circles, that there's a significant amount of overlap and a significant amount of uniqueness depending on the culture, country, context. However, it is at any one point, this is an average data point, but at any one point, 20% of the world's population. So that if you think about yourself and four of your friends, that one of that group is going to meet the diagnostic criterion for a mental health disorder. Those are more commonly depression, anxiety. There are more serious mental illnesses as well, of course, but what happened, I think, during the pandemic and since, if you look at the literature, is that, the societal, the health, the economic, the community and familial challenges that we were facing were very much shared. That for, the needle shifted in terms of, we're all in this overwhelming, incredibly stressful, period of time together, and that combined with social media and the ability to keep contacting and meeting and engaging with people all around the world, particularly our young people, because I think in a lot of ways they led the increased openness toward mental health. And I'd also like to add toward well-being, some of the things that we, I think very often are critical about, people just coming into the workforce currently is that, well, they're setting work-life limits. They contracted for so much, and that's a well-being question, which is important for leaders across the globe. But what varies, mental health needs are significant any place, no matter what the income level of a particular country is. The treatment gap, as the World Health Organization defines it, is much greater in parts of the world that have fewer economic resources. And so there you'll see people in need of therapeutic interventions, sometimes psychiatric, which is typically pharmaceutical, treatment for mental illness, not receiving that. And people who stay in an acute phase get sicker, and then stigma increases, right? It's hard to understand because mental illness, mental well-being is really, it's a brain issue, right? And so more and more, however, and I think along with COVID and social media, and then a lot of the instability across the world, we've seen very global, athletes who are recognized globally, or musicians or actors also saying, hey, I'm taking a moment for myself, or this is, I hear you, it's really hard, and I'm experiencing that too. And this combination of factors has not only shifted, I think, public awareness, but when public awareness increases, governments tend to pay attention. And so there's been a broader shift, I think, in how might we address health, including mental health, from a preventative and an interventive position.
So, Amanda, these conversations are obviously coming up in your, or come out in the discussions that you have with your counterparts around the world. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with practitioners and experts in other regions of the world, and talk about sort of how the APA is leading that charge?
Sure. I've been fortunate to, for really serendipitous reasons, to be able to initiate convening what is now called the Global Psychology Alliance, and that engages over 70 leaders from national, regional, and international associations around the world, in addition to nonprofit leaders and some academicians. And in particular, we've been bringing in early career psychologists and students of psychology from around the world. The wonderful thing that APA has done in supporting this platform is allow psychology across the globe to develop a network. So there's no, cost and equity issues are always a challenge to access to technology. We've been able to support that and really think about psychology, humanity in what I like to think of very inclusive, very equitable, and globally diverse way. And the Alliance meets actually regularly. At a minimum, there's one gathering a week. And the goal there has been to come together. It doesn't matter how well-resourced, how big any one association is, to make a difference on things like climate impacts on mental health, or health equity and access to care. We need to work together. So we bring science to that, but also adapt it depending on particular language and cultural considerations.
So how is the difference actually being made? Are papers being written? Are reports being circulated? How is that actually being done? And you did mention to me previously, it's a completely voluntary group that clearly all of the parties involved see the importance, that they're meeting so regularly. There's no one behind them forcing them to join, be part of this alliance. So how is the change being made?
It is pretty miraculous. I mean, people show up and do work. It's been years now, to be honest. I mean, as a psychologist, I find it phenomenal, in terms of human behavior, commitment, and collaborative approaches. We really, it depends on the issue and the audience. So during COVID, there was a worldwide increase in home-based violence. And we came together, well, whether it was Belgium, Nicaragua, Bangladesh. This work was actually even translated and adapted into 3 indigenous languages, a couple in Ecuador and 1 in Guatemala, and developed like a toolkit that our relevant member associations or universities and nonprofits could then disseminate to all of their members or their communities. In regards to climate, health, and stress, trauma related to major disasters, we've done everything from grassroots advocacy at the United Nations Conference of the Parties, right? The big climate meetings, to training programs for professionals and students. I think it's really driven by a shared need, and then how it might resonate, what form would resonate best given that need and the broad range of audiences that we're working with. But we have a website, and we have, you name it. We're really, I mentioned that I watched many of your prior interviews. I thought they were brilliant, and a handful of the people that you'd spoken with had touched on the importance of like flexibility in a global space, and so we really do try to take that approach, listening.
What
And
is that website? Why don't you share it with our viewers?
yeah, if you, it's a Global Psychology Alliance.
Okay, so
if you Google it, at the American Psychological Association. Thank you.
perfect. And do you have a sense of impact? How are you measuring impact? Is the work of the Alliance changing lives? Presumably, yes.
Yeah, I again think that, so when we first started and everyone was at home, and it was for the first item that I mentioned, we measured just clicks from our various partner associations. So, and I'm trying to remember now, but I believe one of the partners that's part of the Alliance is the National Psychological Association of Ukraine, and their Facebook posts had about 500,000 clicks on that particular document. We also have successfully, and sometimes it's small steps, but we had members of the Alliance who we brought to New York, United Nations, on a tablet, right? So because we have psychologists nearby who could go, but advocated at a grassroots level to have psychology and a mental health resolution passed on the General Assembly floor. This was led by the Mexican mission at the United Nations. So, but we brought in Jamaica, and we brought in Nigeria, and it resonates when we can pull countries together. And that actually passed, which was the first resolution on mental health to pass at the United Nations General Assembly. So we're very proud of being part of that advocacy effort. We've published a book, on climate psychology that's at an organizational level with our partners in New Zealand. So, sometimes our impact is measured by some of these policy-ish efforts. Some of it is actually just who seems to be even looking at what we're doing. And then, of course, the Alliance keeps growing. So in terms of participation, that's been a really strong, I think, positive data point for us.
Excellent. Amanda, we're coming to the end of our brief discussion here. You clearly work with folks all around the world on a regular basis, and part of the reason for this series is to give advice for other executives such as yourself who are doing work internationally. What advice do you have for them? What's worked for you? What lessons have you learned? What should people be mindful of?
I think it's important to note that a healthy workforce is a more productive workforce. That if you, in the mental health world, we consider disability adjusted life years. Those are dailies. It's basically lost productive time at work due to a mental disorder. And actually 16%. So in addition to anything like heart conditions, cancer, at least 16% of low productivity and or absence at work is attributable to mental health need. And it's documented. API actually has a wonderful, I think, as a leader myself, workplace psychology series. If you look for workplace psychology on the APA webpage, that it's important for all leaders, executives, to understand that APA, our partners around the globe, we have a strong scientific base showing that the more we emphasize health and well-being in the workplace, the better any of our corporations, nonprofits are going to be able to achieve their mission. And certainly a leader sets a tone for an entire organization. So if a leader at a very high level is willing to acknowledge mental health and well-being, that speaks volumes to their company. I think it's a win-win. You have happy employees and you have a very successful organization.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's leave it there for today. I appreciate you sharing more about the APA and the incredible global work that you and your colleagues are doing. So thank you. For more information about Global Insider Talks interview series, visit factumglobal.com. Thank you.